Good afternoon, guys. How are you all doing? Welcome back to Historical Horses. I hope you've had a really good week and you're ready for a very chilled Friday. I have to keep remembering that I now upload on a Friday, not a Sunday. It is currently a Sunday for me. We are very much just at the end of September now, so I suspect this video won't go out probably till the kind of end of October, which is a scary thought. Also really cold already. I think it's meant to go down to like 4 degrees tonight. It's quite chilly for September. But anyway, it feels nice and it's been the most glorious day here. You know when you get that gorgeous autumn sun and everything's so golden and oh, beautiful day. Anyway, let's get on to today's topic. I came across this topic while I was looking for images for a previous video, and this is becoming a very common theme. So I saw this photo, I'll put it up on the screen now, and I was like, what is the horse pulling? Obviously it's some sort of cart, well, a kind of barrel on wheels, and I was like, what is that? Never seen that kind of picture before. And it's brilliant because then it sparked my interest, and then I start researching it, and then I'm like, oh, okay, well, this is a new topic. It's not the most horsey topic, I will say, but it's still quite interesting, so I thought let's do it. So in fact, this cart is a night soil cart, and there is a bit of a clue in the name of it that it collected human waste, bathroom waste, and it was pulled by a horse. So men called nightmen or night soil men worked the job of collecting people's human waste, their bathroom waste, at night. So they would go into like cesspools, cesspits, they'd go into privies, they would clean out drains. They'd actually literally take people's chamber pots from their kind of backyard and take away the waste. And this was obviously a very stinky job, but a really important job and a very necessary job, because these were in times where we didn't have indoor plumbing or great sewage systems or anything like that. And actually we can kind of trace it back to ancient times, this job role. And in Tudor times, the name for a person that did this job was called a gong farmer, which I thought was quite unusual, a gong farmer. And I believe gong in like Old English means to go. So there you go, just in case you were interested. For this particular video, we're looking at kind of Georgian to Victorian times. And this job, by law, had to be done from midnight to 5 a.m. You couldn't do it earlier and you couldn't do it later, because obviously it created quite a stink. They didn't want to disturb people. But also these people that did this job, these men, and again, this was a really important job they did. They were really ostracized from society. People really didn't want to go near them because of the job they did, even though it was really important and it helped them out. They were very like, oh, don't come near us, don't come near us, you know, kind of like the shame that you do that job, which was awful. And this was an incredibly physical job and very dangerous. So as I said, this isn't a particularly horsey video. Horses were involved because they pulled the night soil cart, and there's very little to find out about what type of horses they used. The likelihood is that it was probably a slightly older horse. It would have been a horse that would have had to have been very patient, because they would have had to have waited quite a while human waste was collected and poured into the back of that cart. So they would have had to have been very patient, very mannerly, stood still nice and quietly while that job was done. They may well have been a kind of older horse, because I feel like a young horse perhaps wouldn't have been so patient. Maybe an older horse that had done a kind of more heavier going job, but was perhaps slowing down a little bit, because this wouldn't have been a job that needed speed necessarily. They would have needed to have been strong, because obviously as the night wore on, that cart would have got heavier and heavier. But still, I have no idea just how heavy it would have got. I don't feel like it perhaps had the same kind of challenges as perhaps pulling an omnibus or something like that. The issues I think with this job would have been, they would have covered some decent mileage every night going from house to house, but also the weather. In summer, even at night, which would have been better, the stench would have been horrific, wouldn't it? I mean, I don't know if that would have affected the horse. I mean, they would have definitely smelt it. But also, when you think about winter time, this was all going on at night. How cold that horse must have been, just stood still, waiting for that cart on the back to be filled up before they moved on to the next house, through the wind, the rain, all the nasty weather. And this is all done at night. So in the middle of winter, that's when the temperatures are going to be at their lowest. That wouldn't have been much fun. That really wouldn't have been much fun. And being that it wasn't perhaps a super active job role for a horse, that means they were stood still getting cold. They were stood still getting wet and cold. Like, that's not a nice job. That's not a nice job at all. And quite often, nightmen, night soilmen, did other jobs. This was like an extra job, collecting human waste at night. So they might have been chimney sweeps. They might have done grounds work. They might have laid pipes, something quite physical, but being a nightman was quite often a side hustle as such. So who knows? Maybe these horses also did other jobs in the day. We won't know. So they still worked incredibly hard, but there would have been periods where they were stood still for quite a long time, which maybe in summer was fine, but in winter that would have been horrid. And I'm guessing all types of horses could have done this job. I don't think there would have been one specific breed. And you see in that photo, that just looks like a kind of standard middleweight horse. It's not a particularly heavy horse. So I feel like majority of horses could do the job. Now, going back to the men that did this job, they often worked in teams. So you would have a ropeman, you would have a tubman, and you would have a holeman. And firstly, one of the big dangerous parts of this job was actually falling into these cesspits, which did happen. Also, breathing in the fumes from the waste was incredibly dangerous. And disease, this is human waste. There was going to be disease. And obviously we're talking about a period of time where disease was very high. So they were really putting themselves in quite a bit of danger. And they didn't have, overalls and special clothing. They just was just wearing their normal stuff. So it was a really dangerous job. And simply, it was a shovel and bucket job. Literally, you're shoveling up the waste, putting it into a bucket. The bucket gets pulled up, then gets emptied into the back of the night soil cart, goes back down, and it just works like that. Yeah. It was a grim job. It was a grim job. Now, being that this job was always done at night, how spooky is that? Spooky for the horse, because that means the horse is always working in the pitch black. Of course they had lamps, but still, that horse is going around the streets at night. Think of the things these nightmen saw. Quite often caught burglars in the act trying to break into properties. I read in newspaper articles, they were often pulled up in court to kind of witness, say, I saw that man trying to break into that house, such and such. They found, and this I read was actually common, they found dead bodies in cesspits. I read one which was of a child, which just sounded horrific. Imagine finding that. Imagine getting lowered down into the cesspit and finding a body in there. And like I say, in the newspaper articles, this was quite a common thing. It was a great place to dispose of a body, which is just, as if it wasn't a bad enough job getting rid of the human waste, you're then finding bodies in there as well. So I bet you're thinking, where did all this human waste go then? So I found this lovely old map. I'll put on the screen what it's called. And you'll see in the image that there is a place called Dung Wharf. And this was by the river. And this is where all the human waste went and animal waste went. And it got mixed together. It then got put onto barges and then sent to London's market gardens to be used as fertiliser. So it's good because it had a use. I don't know if you guys have ever smelt human waste being used as a fertiliser. So a couple of years ago, I worked somewhere where they used or partially used human waste on the land. Oh my God, the smell was unbearable. Like, I don't mind the smell of cow muck and whatever, that's fine. But this was like I was taking some horses out hacking and I barely could cope. The smell was that bad. So can you just imagine in London, if you lived near Dung Wharf, just how bad the smell would have been, human waste and animal waste. But it is great that it got used as fertiliser. And actually, for the men that owned these little businesses of being nightmen, quite often the business owners probably didn't actually do the work, they just hired nightmen. It wasn't a bad business to be in because you got paid by landlords, private owners of houses, even parishes to collect the bathroom waste. And then you also got paid for selling it as fertiliser. So it was a pretty nifty business. And this job went on to sort of early 1900s. And then when we started getting better sewage systems, better plumbing in houses, the job finished. There was no need for nightmen or night soil men anymore. Now I've got all these lovely little adverts and trade cards that I found online just to give you an idea of how people advertise their services. Now this first little advert, you can see that it's actually a woman that has taken on the business, which I think is brilliant. This one's a very smart one, and I love it that in the image you can see very clearly that this is done at night time. But these are little trade cards as well, but they give you a little idea. Lots of them from the sort of late 1700s. But there was a fair few of them online to see. So like you say, loving the little images to just give you an idea of the job role. A night soil cart was also known as a honeypot cart. Thank you for watching, guys. Like I say, it wasn't a particularly horse-filled topic today. Yes, a horse was involved for pulling the night soil cart, but there wasn't really much information on the type of horses. I don't know whether they hired these horses or whether they actually own them themselves, the businesses. Who knows? There wasn't really any information on it, but I still thought it was quite an interesting topic, so I thought I'll do it anyway. But I hope you enjoyed. It is an interesting one, isn't it? Stinky job, that's for sure.